G'day, welcome to my workshop. I'm Steve and this is Woodworking Masterclass and part 6 and the conclusion of building a 4x3 bookcase. Alright, we've got all the fluting done, the bottom skirting's fitted. Now we've got to finish it off by putting the top on, putting the moulding on the top, filling all the holes. So first things first, we've got to fit the top. What I'll do is grab a block plane and just sand these boards flat so they're flush with the top here. So now we've got all this part nice and flush. We've got to put the top shelf on. Now, this is the widest board I could get from the hardware shop, and I just got a splinter out of that. Ow. And as you can see, it does give me a bit of a lip here on the top and also on the ends. However, I want to use some moulding to give it a little bit more style, and if I put this capping moulding underneath there, you'll see that this isn't wide enough to accommodate the moulding. And what I'm going to do is I've got two narrower boards, and when I join them together, that's going to give me more than enough width for the top. So there are a lot of ways you can join these boards together. You could use dowels, you could use biscuits, you can just butt join them, you can use dominoes, but I'm going to use a sprung joint. Alan, you do whatever you like, but if you get stuck, I'm sure Richard will have an alternative for you. Now, a sprung joint is when I use a hand plane. In this case, I'll use a number 7. And I start to plane straight. Then when I get to about here, I put extra pressure down on the plane itself, and that will give me a dip, and then I release the pressure up this end. Now, that dip will only be a matter of a thou or a couple of thous of an inch. But that's enough to give me a bit of a hollow that when I join the two boards together, they're going to be like that. And when I press them together, they're going to squeeze up nice and tight, and that actually puts extra pressure on the ends. And that's what we want. So that triangle there means when I put the boards together, I know which is up and which is down. Now I've got to plane these two inner surfaces here. If you're not confident using a hand plane, there's a little trick you can do, because we all tend to roll right or left, and it's only through practice you actually plane straight. If you put two boards together, now these are going to be joined this way, so if I pick them up like this and then put that in the vise together, what happens if I am planing to the left or to the right, and exaggerated, but if I was to plane a slope like that, for example, what happens is when I actually put these boards together, this part will meet with this part here. So that's a trick. If you're doing two boards and they're going to be joined together, put them together the way you want them to be. Pop them in the vise, use a little bit of water to hold them so they don't slip everywhere. You might even have to put a clamp on each end. Get your plane, make sure it's set for a fine cut, the blade central and sharp, a little bit of candle grease. Now, as I've said before, I'm going to be gluing these two surfaces together, so I'm not going to put wax on the back of the sole. On the front's fine because the wax here will be leading the blade So this will have wax along here, and then when the blade comes along, it will actually plane off the wax. Whereas if I've got it on the back of the sole, I'm actually leaving a wax surface on the areas that I want to glue, and they won't glue all that successfully. So a little bit of candle grease on the front, then it's a question of lining it up, having a nice stance. I'll take a couple of straight cuts first, and then I'll do the sprung joint. Now I'll do the sprung joint. I'll start by putting downward pressure about 2-3 inches in, and the same on the outside. Now how I do that is I take a normal cut, and when I get to that point I push down on the toe of the plane and keep going until I get to nearly the other end, then I release it and keep pressure on the heel, and that'll give me that dip that I'm looking for. Should only take about 2 or 3 passes. And that should be enough. By rights, if I put these together and hold them up to the light, there should be a very slight gap in the middle of the board. And there is. Alright. So set your clamps up to the desired width before you actually start gluing up. So once your clamps are all set, got another one here to go over the top, grab the glue, and it's just a question of putting the glue on. I like to double glue, that way I know that I get good glue coverage. Lay them out flat. Make sure your triangle lines up. Now this is where the sprung joint actually happens. Get a rag, bit of water, and just wipe off the excess glue. So while that's drying, what we can do is start to finish sand the carcass and fill in all the nail holes. And if you've had any mistakes and you slip when you're putting the nails in and your hammer actually hit the piece of timber and it's bruised, all you need is a squirt bottle. See if we've got any on this side. Yep, I've got one here. Now all I'm going to do, squirt a bit of water on there. And I'll let that set. I might have to give it 2 or 3 applications, but that will eventually come out, and then we can sand it flat. As for the other nail holes, as I did last time, bit of masking tape. Obviously after we fitted the top, we're going to have to do some around where the moulding goes, but we can do 99% of it now. And don't forget these ones right in the corners. I'm not going to worry about putting any putty in the backboards. As I said, I like them natural the way they are. Okay, so when you went around and filled in all those holes, the other thing to look for is pencil marks. And I've got pencil marks here and here where I put the fluting in. I've got some pencil marks I can see on the inside of the carcass, which let me know which was the front and which was the back. And no, pencil marks are gone there. But just go around and with a rubber, take off the pencil marks. I believe they call this multitasking. So the glue is starting to dry on the top, the putty is drying in the nail holes, the bruises are expanding with water, but we still got little bits to do. I'd grab a piece of sandpaper, maybe 180 grit, and now I'm just going to take a very nice arris off all these shells so they're not really hard. I don't want to have a 45-degree angle as such on them, but I just want to take the sharpness out. Quite nice to touch, no sharp edges. And don't forget, if you've got this little quirk down here, just give that a little bit of a rub and around over there. Let your hands be your guide, and they'll tell you if there's any sharp edges. Now you can start to clean up these flutes. And for that, it's get another bit of paper and just sort of roll it into that type of shape and rub it up and down inside the flute. If there's any problems with doing these flutes, they generally occur either on the entry or the exit side. So just pay a little bit more attention to the top and the bottom in case there's any kicks, and then you just sand those out and blend it all in. And be warned, sandpaper gets hot, your thumb burns. Now if all these ones are dry along here, sand these edges so you're getting that sharp edge off, and you can also knock the putty back at the same time. And if you've got a random orbital sander, they're fine, and I would use one on the sides. Now the reason I specify a random is sometimes just the orbital sanders, the square ones, they will leave marks, and when you finish your job, no matter what you're putting on, it will show through, whereas a random orbital sander, it doesn't leave the marks. I'll just do down this side. And that's nicely finished, but I tell you what I did notice, when I was sanding, I had my hand on the inside rail, and I haven't knocked these edges off yet, so that's something to be mindful of. Just get a bit of 180 or 150 or something, and just knock the sharp edges off the inside of these cover strips. I reckon it should be dry now. So I'll put this to one side, grab the top. And that's quite nicely joined. Just where that very fine ridge is, I'll just rip that off with the block plane. Or if you've got an orbital sander, by all means, same thing. Now that's nice and flat and smooth, we'll pull the bookcase back up, measure how much we have to cut off the ends and the sides, and then we can fit the top. Get the lid with the side, the face you want up, facing outwards obviously. Place a piece of moulding between the front stretcher and the top, and then with a ruler, just work out what you think looks good to you. There's no hard and fast rule. For me, I think about 19 mil past the edge of this moulding looks good, or 3/4 of an inch. So with that in mind, I now know the width of the top, so the piece I have to cut off, I divide that by 2, and I'll go over to the saw shortly, and I'll cut equal amounts off both edges. Alright, there's the top, cut to length. So we've got that nice overhang there, and there's the equal amount on the ends and down this end, so it's going to be nice and balanced. Now how do we fit the top on? What I want to do is use 30mm screws. Now it's very important, if you're going to screw a top on this way, that the screws are no longer than the 2 bits of timber, or else you're going to get a screw coming through the top. And I've left enough room so I can actually get a cordless drill in there and screw through here into the top. So first things first, we've got to put some holes in the top. And we don't have to do it this way, we can actually screw in from the top down. And make sure that the screw goes in there quite easily, because there's not going to be any thread cut into this part of the bookcase. It just has to be a hole basically. Now you push on the top and also push on the drill. I actually start with the middle row in the middle. A bit like doing the head on a car. Start at the middle and work out in a radius. Now that's nice and tight, and there are no screws poking through. And I've been over to the miter saw and I've cut opposite miters to go on the ends, and I've cut one end of the front bar. Now the other bit I'll cut once I've measured it and know exactly what I need. First of all, we place one piece of moulding on the side of the cabinet and push it up, and then bring this top piece of moulding in so we get a nice tight miter joint like that. Next, with a pencil, mark the back of the top shelf. Once you've docked that to length, get a very small drill a couple of pilot holes for the nails to go in, and just tack it into place. And then square up the top. Just put a mark there. Now I've got the two miters. Simply a question of putting it up. Same deal, a little bit of glue and some nails, and I'll pre-drill a couple of nail holes, I think. And again, get the last piece, put it up, push it in so you've got a nice, good tight fit there, and just mark the back of the shelf. Go over to the saw and just knock that off the length. Now, of course, if you've got a nail gun, it's much easier to go poof, poof, poof. I don't possess one, although I might buy one after this. And again, get a wet rag and just take off any excess glue that's come through. Now fill up the holes. Just finishing sanding the putty off of the moulding. Now that's all nice and smooth. Everything's sanded, everything's puttied, everything's finished. One last little bit of decoration we do before we put a finish on it, and that's on the top. And what I want to do there is put a round over, just to take that sharpness off, and it's the same tool, the same bit that I used to actually round over the spreader on the top. And as usual, if you're going to use a router or any power tools, remember safety equipment, goggles, earmuffs. But I've got to share with you, how cool is this? The team at iMuffs that make this wonderful 2-in-1 safety piece of gear got together and created a unique one-off set of camouflaged earmuffs to go with my apron. How cool is that? George and the team, mate, I'm super impressed. In fact, I'm blown away. So I'll christen them on this job. I'll take the protective coating off the front there. Got the can't see me gear on and the able to see me gear on, so I'll route this top. Now I'll just get a little bit of sandpaper, run underneath to take that sharp edge off. I run the sander over the top to make sure it's nice and flat. Then we can start putting a finish on it. And by the way, these work really well. There you have one 4x3 bookcase, hand-built by you, and would be a delight to have in anyone's home. But we've got to put a finish on it. And what finish? Well, what I did, I got in contact with the people at 4'x3 and said, what is the modern finish that people are using? And they sent me up a couple of tins of this. It's called 4'x3 Stain and Varnish in Liming White. Now, you can spray it or you can paint it. It's water-based, and they assure me it's easy to put on. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to try both. First of all, I'm going to use a sponge brush, and I'm going to brush one coat on, see how that goes, and then when that's dry, I'll actually use a spray gun to give it another coat just to see how it comes up. And here we go. I'm going to do the inside bottom shelf first. And at first, you really can't tell much difference, but they recommend 3 coats, and I can see that that's going to lighten it up. It goes on nice and easily with the brush. So I'll finish doing this, and then I'll spray it, and we'll have a look at that. Bob was so excited about getting that cabinet sprayed that he wagged his tail all over it. Didn't you, Bob? Well, there we have it. A beautiful 4'x3 bookcase, 3 coats of stain and lacquer on it, and it's ready to go up to the house. So this is Steve pulling the shed door down on another project and saying, remember to keep it sharp, but more importantly, keep it safe and enjoy your woodwork. And I'm now going to take this up to the house and we'll see how it looks inside.
You've cut that wrong. If you haven't noticed.
G'day, Steve here, Woodworking Masterclass. You know, when I need hardware or any bits and pieces, this is where I come. Masters Parkinson, near Browns Plains in Queensland. But with almost 60 stores nearly Australia wide, there's bound to be one near you. So why don't you do as I do, go to Masters for your hardware. And if you see me in the Parkinson store, say good day.